Hi, I'm Daniel, and before the episode starts, I want to briefly talk to you about the Garden Outreach Project, a WCF program focused on putting faith into action. Our mission is to inspire and support Christadelphians in North America to share Christ's love through outreach initiatives. This is done by facilitating national and local outreach activities, supplying resources, and providing funds to help brothers and sisters serve those in need. For example, in 2020, over 40 ecclesial groups participated in our Bags of Love initiative, which saw over 800 sleeping bags distributed to shelters and those without a home. If you, your ecclesia, or CYC want to learn more and get involved with our latest initiative, please visit our website at www.thegardenoutreach.org. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Garden Outreach for the latest news and encouragement. And now, here's the show.
Welcome back to Little Faith. Today I'm here with Dan Weatherall and Paul Davenport from Bible Feed. Hi Dan and Paul, how are you doing?
Hi Helen, I'm very good, thanks.
Hi, good to be here.
And you're both joining us from England, my homeland.
That's correct.
Tell us how you're doing. You're both currently in lockdown at the moment, aren't you?
We are, yeah. It's pretty normal though to be in lockdown now. So, yeah, it's just keeping on really. Nothing really major to complain about on that.
Where are you based, Dan?
In the Midlands, North Warwickshire. So, right in the middle of the country.
And who are you in lockdown with? Like, who's in your household?
My wife and my two boys. Yeah.
Nice.
So there's plenty going on.
Keeps you busy. And what about you, Paul?
I'm in Rugby, so not so very far from Dan, but we haven't actually been in the same room for a very long time, it seems. But it's work can happen at home. Everything's just at home at the moment, and I actually had to take my car in to be serviced a couple of weeks ago. It was just quite a quick service, so I took it in, and I worked in the dealership while it was being serviced, and it was just wonderful to be working in a different place.
Yeah, to
for
go
a change.
somewhere else.
Yeah,
there's times where I just like linger in my car in a car park sometimes. It's just like I don't have to go home again. So we're here to talk about Bible Feed, which you started about a year ago. Is that right?
It's probably nearly 2 years actually.
Oh, 2 years
When it actually sort of started off as a thing, it really kicked off, I think, about a year ago. So it's taken a lot of our energy and time. It's very enjoyable doing it. So
tell us, what is Bible Feed?
We create and share quality digital content from the Christadelphian community across social media platforms to help everyone, ourselves included, to read and understand the Bible better. So that's kind of, slogan, mission, name, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's a witness, it's a preaching thing, it's an online hub of resources that we're trying to create and share to help preach the gospel.
The original concept from Dan primarily was there needs to be something that is representing Christadelphians and is a hub, a center for good, relevant, quality material. I think from my point of view, I just wanted to start a podcast, and so I jumped on the back of Dan's idea and rode along with it.
Let's dig into that a bit. Why are podcasts so popular, do you think? And let's talk a little bit more about having the need for these resources, because potentially people are consuming content and consuming information in a different way.
Yeah, definitely so. And that probably have been for a very long time. Probably the pandemic made everybody realize that, myself included, that if you want to be preaching the gospel, then at that point when everyone suddenly was sitting in their homes, what were we doing? What could we possibly do other than do something online effectively. To be honest, that kind of was, a big part of what we ought to have been doing anyway, because not many people just rocked up to an ecclesial hall. There needed to be more of an outreach sort of way of preaching, but that really just showed that, I think. In terms of how people consume content, it's digital a lot, isn't it? It's videos, it's on demand as well, isn't it? That's so a podcast is something that, people can just choose to get and choose to listen to at the time they want, and it's right there in the podcast app, so it's easy to do. So
yeah, I mean, I just think it's a great way of communicating. It can be so engaging, particularly when you've got 2 or 3 voices in an episode and thinking about a concept from different points of view, and that automatically engages the listener in thinking, well, which of those points of view do I think is right? And we've got the content in what we're doing in our ecclesial halls on a Sunday. And I thought, let's get some of the speakers to talk about their subject and do a podcast from it. But it didn't quite happen. I just didn't quite do it. And then the lockdown happened, and suddenly you're into a different way of thinking, and you just stop. I think you just stop thinking, I can't do this until I've planned it out properly. You just get on and do it. And so it's kind of developed from there.
But that's how it all started as well. We're coming up to a year, aren't we, soon, when that kicked off. But it was probably about a year before that, I think, when I suddenly decided that I was going to create something called Bible Feed. And I kind of remember it quite clearly that I was having growing frustration that there was all sorts of different things out there from our community that was online and being shared, of all sorts of different quality, both in terms of content, things that were being said, and in terms of purely just, it looking like, something's looking like they're 20 years old, that kind of thing, and moaning about it internally in my head, maybe to other people sometimes about that for a long time. And then suddenly thinking, I shouldn't just be moaning about this or grumbling about it, let's just do something. So the concept was to create a hub that could take the good content that's out there, because there's plenty of great stuff that our community produces, and basically become an aggregator of that, and then find it and share it out. So that's the whole idea of it being a Bible feed. This is a good way of feeding you good material about the Bible. So
there's good material that is suitable for public promotion of the gospel. And to some extent, we are a community that does a lot of study internally, talking to each other often about the scriptures and God and Jesus and so on, does a lot of that, which is a great thing, but it's mostly for internal consumption. It's for our community, but it gets put online and almost by default becomes the public face of Christadelphians. This, I think, is very much thinking about material that is publicly suitable.
That's also, I think, that's how our goals align, like with WCF and yours, is our goal is to produce things that build up faith either in North America, that's where WCF started, but especially through the pandemic, like our audience has become so international, to like build up faith anywhere in the world. And really that's the litmus test, I hope, that I kind of use when deciding what we're going to do. Is this going to build up faith or is it not?
That's really good, actually. Yeah, because we're publicly visible whether we like it or not. Anyone sort of lives a life and people draw conclusions about what they're like, and if they have Christ's name on them, i.e. they're Christians, Christadelphians, they're people who bear the name of Jesus, how you live and act, that people will draw conclusions about Christ based on you. So it's really, really important as well, isn't it, to like you say, is this going to build up? So is this conversation I'm having with this brother or sister, is this something that's going to going to be useful and profitable and helpful for people. But then take that concept for, preaching the gospel and so on. We're meant to be a city set on a hill that can't be hid. That's from the Sermon on the Mount. We're meant to be the light of the world. All these concepts are there. We're meant to be visible, and we want to make sure that we're taking Christ to the world in the best possible way, in the most relevant and the most faithful way possible. It's really important, I think, and no doubt we're not doing everything perfectly, but hopefully we're aiming to give it a boost, and hopefully it's something that can help the community.
Yeah, and I'd say that publicly suitable kind of criteria, that doesn't mean dumbed down or simplistic at all. If you're choose the right format and communication method, you can go into some pretty deep concepts, and I think we have in some of our podcasts. Or we always seem to end up at the end saying, yeah, we've just scratched the surface of this, and at some time we'll come back to it and do it in more detail. Yeah, I think you can still do the depth.
Yeah, I agree. What have you covered so far over the last 2 years? Tell me a bit more about what's on your site.
Okay, so what have we got? We've got some videos. So the first major thing I tried to sort of do, which I must say had a lot of help from a lot of willing people who helped out on this, was just to produce some video content with some stock footage and a script which was read out, and some kind people, brothers and sisters, gave some voiceovers of that. And it's a very sort of simple thing, but hopefully effective, and there's a few videos there on our site. They're on our Facebook page as well. Yeah, at the start of the first lockdown, we did a couple of live webinars, didn't we? That was perhaps the first thing that we did, which was great. It's really good fun just to go live and see what happens. And they're recorded and they're on the website as well. So that was about how to read the Bible. Why would you read the Bible, and is it a good time to read the Bible? So they're kind of timeless things that are good resources there.
Yeah, and I think originally we thought that that's what most of the material would be, a sort of video recordings of those kind of conversations.
Yeah,
and then it sort of developed into, well, let's have the audio as the podcast and use the videos as the sort of highlights. And I think actually that combination has worked really well.
Yeah, it is good. You shoehorned your way in, didn't you, Paul? And got your podcast in the end.
I got in there.
Yeah. No, it has. It's been really good. So yeah, audio is all there for people to listen to, but then some sort of short video highlights that we try and do as much as time permits to put those things out.
What have you found challenging or perhaps interesting about creating Bible Feed?
Because we really started it out in lockdown, it was all internet based.
Yeah.
So challenges of just internet connections, and Dan's microphone until he invested in a microphone. But I think there's what I found interesting and kind of surprisingly helpful is, I think, our Christadelphian heritage of interpretation is a rich source of material. It is a great heritage, and it doesn't actually take that much to sort of lift that, change some of the terminology and the way it's communicated and the way we talk about it, and it turns it into something that is very relevant to people today. And I think it's been challenging to do more of sort of putting ourselves in our potential audience's shoes and having a peer group review process around the material that we put out. But that's been a really important sort of check and control, and just making sure that we are sticking with what we intend to do, which is publicly relevant, not full of terminology that people won't understand, that sort of thing.
Oh, I love how you've got peer reviews.
Yeah, that I must say, actually, that's such an important piece of what we do. We really, really value the people who just have a look at the scripts before a podcast or read a blog post or whatever. It's really, really helpful, because quite often there are things that people will say, actually, I'm not sure this comes across that way, or you need to make sure you avoid that topic that's not needed, or that sort of thing. So yeah, big shout out to people who do that. It's well worthwhile. And I think doing all this, suddenly it forces you to focus on the things that are important. It's so easy just to swing through life and even just your Bible study or whatever, and sort of get diving into side speculation or really interesting stuff that actually isn't potentially as helpful, or it might be a bit controversial or whatever. But producing this material, you've got to really think, what is the aim of this, and therefore cuts out some of the things that aren't going to help towards that aim.
And I think constructing it as a script for a conversation, I think forces you into thinking about the logical flow of the points, and you get partway through, and then, but what about this? Deal with that question, objection, before moving on. And I think in some ways that enables you to present a much clearer, more coherent sort of set of ideas on a topic.
I suppose part of the being a conversation is almost some kind of peer review process going on anyway. Whereas if you're just speaking and you're just doing a talk, and people aren't butting in and questioning, then you can miss the things that people might want to know. So the very fact that you're having a conversation and people are asking questions and you're talking about it, that is in itself a check and a balance, which is really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely connects to that we learn a lot from each other, and not just from our format. I mean, I used to teach English actually in England in secondary school, and with my teacher training, they really encouraged us not to call ourselves teachers but facilitators, to facilitate learning and to encourage students to work together and learn from each other. And I certainly would be marked down for standing for talking for half an hour at my students. That would be a bad lesson. It needed interaction, and almost just to kind of just do a short introduction and then get them working in and learning together and doing their own deconstruction of what a text, because I taught English, and then to feed back as in groups or then to everyone, and they learned so much. This dialogue, it's so important.
This format, because like you said, in teaching now and probably for a while now, it's been this method of learning has been prevalent, hasn't it? So we ought to be producing an awful lot of our teaching material, teaching the gospel in a similar way, so that people can easily engage with it. So
evaluate it. I think the biggest thing that I learned from my teaching experience is that we have to evaluate our learning, almost to know whether we've learned something, which I think is very fascinating in terms of how we read scripture and gain some awareness that we're thinking and doing.
There seems to be a lot of that conversation style going on in the Christian world, if you like, and part of a wider movement of people thinking about their faith and doing the deconstructing and reconstruction. And from that point of view, it seems like a really good time for us to be kind of developing our own voice in that Christian world that is bringing the Unitarian viewpoint into that massive Christian voice. I think in one of our the podcast sort of explaining what Bible Feed is about, we sort of noted that there were 80. You do a Google search for Christian podcasts and it comes up with something like, these are the top 80 Christian podcasts you must listen to. And and not many of those will be giving a Unitarian viewpoint,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's space in there for us to do that in this conversation style.
But what Paul just said about people sort of deconstructing and so on, it's so true. There's so many people out there searching for answers. It's so common to hear people in our community say our society doesn't want the truth and doesn't accept the truth or isn't looking. And yeah, if you broad brush it like that, that's true. Society as a whole doesn't want this and doesn't want the gospel. But there are individuals every day asking questions out on, well, right now, because we're in lockdown, the only way I can see those questions is online. But there's people asking things like, so I've been doing some Bible study and it looks like the devil is actually, it seems to be a parable or a metaphor for human sin. I'm not quite sure what to make of this. Can anyone help? Or there's people saying different things about, anyone recommend some books or about Bible study, and can anyone help me? And there's so many people out there every day asking those questions, and I think we really ought to be answering them with the gospel. And so having some material that can make that easy for people, such as Bible feed material, the podcasts, we can say, oh, actually, yeah, you're right about the devil. Have a look at episode whatever and see what you think, and let me know, and start to build some relationships with people that they're out there and they're searching. It's not true to say society doesn't want the gospel. There's a lot of people who need it, really. And so hopefully, a lot of noise, a lot of different voices. It's really important that we're part of that voice, part of that mass of voices.
That's fantastic. Since I moved to America, I've met a lot of people, maybe more so, like, just because it's more cultural, that they grew up in a Christian family or went to church when they were younger. Then, through their 20s, 30s, just it wasn't part of their life. And then for many have want to explore it again, but then they're not really sure, a lot of things that they grew up with don't sit that well with them anymore. They've got a lot of questions, and they do want to talk about it. They do want to explore these things. And a lot more of that is just this in personal friendships and relationships. They want these conversations. And as you say, you can't have these at the moment because we're also isolated from each other, being in our own homes because of lockdown. And the way to connect with each other is virtually and digitally, and to find information. And there's such a vast amount of information out there. It is really hard to find things that you actually want, what you're looking for any topic, let alone talking about Christianity. You've talked a little bit about you're going to hopefully start a series on the Trinity, and you've recently started a series on Matthew. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
What other plans have you got for the Bible feed this year, God willing?
Well, you're going to do something on Revelation as well, aren't you, Paul?
Yeah. This is sort of based on some studies I did last year, which was really focusing on the book of Revelation as a coherent, from beginning to end, letter and message to first century ecclesias, and then to by extension to ecclesias of any age. So it's looking at it slightly differently, but I think helpfully bringing it into relevance for today.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really good. There's a lot of talk in Christianity at the moment about what's the mark of the beast and whether it's something that's going to get rolled out that's mandatory, or in terms of current events. And that, I don't think you're going to say that, are you, Paul? So
no, I won't go in that direction. And it's also a book that is often, perhaps particularly in the Christadelphian community, it's associated with, you've got to know a lot of history, and the sequence of emperors and so on and so forth. And part of the challenge I set for doing the studies on Revelation was, I want this to be exciting and interesting for someone who doesn't know any history. and you don't need to know and you
accessible.
don't need to know any history in order to make it interesting, exciting, relevant. And I think I manage that to some degree. We'll see how that comes across in a podcast.
Of course, the people who first received that letter from John didn't know the history, because it wasn't history then at that point. So and it was a powerful letter for them. So I think that's going to be really helpful. I think Revelation's a big thing, that a big topic that people look for and search for answers. So I'm hoping that would be something that could draw people in that series. So I think that would be useful. What else are we hoping to do? We're all
Matthew. Tell us about Matthew.
Have you listened to it yet, Helen? The first episode you've seen?
Started,
oh, well done. Thank you.
I just started, but I haven't finished yet.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So Matthew, is something I've looked at for probably quite a long time now. Certainly the gospel I'm most familiar with. And so it's just a walkthrough, really. It's not going to be fully in detail. I think we're aiming for 6 episodes, but hopefully, Matthew's great. All the gospels are great, but it introduces you to Jesus, as they all do. So I think that's really, really important to get that central to the message that we're sort of preaching. That this figure, this man Jesus, is essential to faith. But also, as you walk through the gospel, it deals with so many other things. So, in I think maybe the 3rd episode on it, we're going to talk about the temptations, and suddenly you've got this devil or Satan figure that you've got to try and make sense of. And I think there's a really relatively straightforward but really important way of understanding that will help show that what's going on and how Jesus is combating temptation in his mind, and which then sets up the whole theme of the book about how this is about the vision of the kingdom and how the kingdom is going to be brought about. Is it going to be brought about like the revolutionaries of the day or the Pharisees of the day in terms of force and control and power? Or is it about Jesus, who denies himself and denies the offer of taking the kingdoms of the world there and then? And that's a big, huge thing about what Jesus did and about his death. That's central to the gospel. So I'm hoping that will be a nice little unit in itself that can be something that you can, people can recommend and say, here's something that will cover quite a few of the key doctrines in an accessible way, and a short sort of 6-part series. So that's the plan for Matthew.
Fantastic. And so are both these series going to be in conversation with different people, or what's your plan?
So the Matthew one, so it was Lawrence who sort of talked to me about that, and I think through that it's going to be me and him. We're gonna chat through that. I don't know what we're going to do with Revelation yet.
Fantastic.
And so that would be good.
I'm really looking forward to listening to that.
The other thing that we're hoping, its plans are in motion already, actually. So it's all been UK based so far, but we're really keen to expand and be a bit more representative of our international community. So we're exploring that, and hopefully, we can start engaging with other people around the world in our community and get some different voices on to talk about these really important things. So hopefully grow the audience and effectiveness at sort of teaching the gospel in different parts of the world, not just in the UK.
Yeah. That's great. How can people get in touch with you if they have some ideas, or they've got questions, or maybe they even would like to get involved?
Biblefeed.org.
Fantastic.
Have a look at that. There's a really, really straightforward contact us. I think if you email, it's info@biblefeed.org, so you can do that direct. But head over to the website or the Facebook page. Actually, I think you'll find it if you search Bible Feed.
Great.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about your personal faith journeys, reflecting back on your life and kind of what's brought you to this point with your faith, and really connected to Bible Feed. Like, how do you think Bible Feed is connected to your personal faith?
So I was brought up as a Christadelphian, but my father wasn't. So he's kind of given me, I guess, a mindset of critical thinking and engaging with the world of thought that is out there, and being open to thinking about things. I suppose in terms of my spiritual development, there's probably three key points, three moments, if you like, that have sort of brought me to today. The first is being initially part of a smaller fellowship, limited conversations, and so seeking out wider conversations with the broader Christadelphian world just led me to a much deeper and richer understanding of the atonement and the role of Jesus. Why Jesus is so central to our faith and a hope and the resurrection and the way that reconciles us. And I'd say it sounds odd, but the real power of that hit me some years after my baptism, at which I had an intellectual understanding of what I was accepting and doing, but the real emotional and the thing that generates passion about Jesus came a few years later. And then from that small fellowship context, that sort of broke up, and we've ended up in the central, in the broader Christadelphian movement. But through that process, inevitably it involves difficult times, relationships, conversations, and you learn so much about how to be patient, respectful, listen to people carefully about how they're reading, even if you end up disagreeing, and it just teaches you, going through that teaches you so much about how to deal with issues. Doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong, just how you deal with it is so important with other people. And then I guess the third point that's kind of brought me to why we need Bible feed as a way of communicating the gospel in a relevant way in today's world is having children that grow up and ask all the difficult questions that our community generally are not terribly good at addressing. We need an approach that isn't afraid of talking about things that are relevant to people today.
The younger generations, they've got everything at their fingertips in terms of information, but not necessarily any discernment or experience to be able to sift through it. So they definitely need to find some answers. Obviously, there's not always answers to everything, but
sometimes
having the
it
space
is
to explore it.
Yeah, and it's not being afraid to say, actually, we don't have an answer to that, or we don't quite fully understand why it is that way, why God has done things a certain way, and that's a difficult thing. That's, I guess, back to the purpose of a little faith is recognizing there are those situations where you have to trust. You can't explain, but you have to trust that because of Jesus, because that's so central, you just have to then trust.
I've went through that same process with Paul in that same community, a smaller fellowship, and that process of examining things, examining what you have been taught, what you think, looking at scriptures in a very great amount of detail to go through and think these things through. I think that's been an extremely formative period, I suppose, and I guess that's shaped me in being prepared to examine things. So not just accepting what you receive because it's what you've received from before. So being prepared to think things through and own it. I'd say we go so far as saying that's so important because you have to own it. You can't have someone else's faith, can you? You've got to make it your own. that's extremely important. And I suppose then you've therefore, on that basis, you've got to let everyone own it. Everyone's got to go through that period of not just taking everyone else's word for it, but owning their own faith and their own faith journey, which will go through periods of questioning. So I think that whole period has definitely been quite influential. But also, I think it's also taught me a lot about how God works out of imperfection, or out of things that you might not think is a perfect situation. So I might have thought, or I might think, that there's a way of viewing this, there's a way of understanding fellowship or whatever, and I think it's really clear and obvious, and why can't people just see this? So it's really, really obvious, and surely they can just come into line, and we can just move forward on that basis. But it doesn't. Nothing works like that at all. I ought to be really patient and let people again own their own journey and their own understanding, and people have to do it themselves. So but out of that, that's an imperfect situation, or was an imperfect situation, and there's many imperfect situations in our life. Out of all that, there's so much that can still happen, that's good, that can build up, that can help and encourage and inspire and edify. So God works out of that. I suppose that's pretty much what Paul felt like a lot, as in the Apostle Paul, is with the thorn in the flesh, whatever that's referring to, and the people disrupting his teaching. That's what I think he's referring to there. The people going around and disrupting all his progress in teaching the gospel, and yet the grace of God is sufficient for his weakness. So out of imperfect situations, that there can be a lot of good that can come. So I think that's really, really important.
Do you think there were people there, you're talking about deconstruction and reconstruction of your faith and your faith journey? You have a lot of dialogues, of course, on Bible Feed. And do you feel like there were a lot of dialogues before Bible Feed with people that kind of helped that process?
I think it's helped. I think say we set up Bible Feed, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, it probably wouldn't look exactly like it is now. So I think that's probably quite a good point. I think that way of having a good conversation and interrogating things is important, allowing that people to do that, and doing it together with people, and people feeling sort of safe and able to do that is really, really valuable. And in community, that's good. I mean, what we're trying to do, Bible Feed, obviously is very much core gospel, preaching Jesus and him crucified. That's the power of salvation, the gospel. So it's very much, we make sure it's restricted to that, and we're not trying to bring in different and awkward and difficult questions and things, not because they're not important, but at the end of the day, they're kind of I want to say secondary to the main message of Jesus, but they're very important to people at certain stages in their lives, different questions and different things and different issues that they're working through. So they're important, but that model of having conversation, I think, is a good one. I think it's important to note, a lot of people go through a very public and obvious period of doubt or deconstruction. They walk away, or and then maybe they might come back, they've sorted things out in their head, and they return, and they're wiser for it. Or maybe they don't ever return, they never sort of reconcile those things in their mind. So that's not an uncommon experience for people, not just in our community, but in any kind of organized Christian religion, and different sort of worldviews that people have. They deconstruct them sometimes. But actually, I think probably most people go through something like that but slowly and internally and not publicly. So most people probably always have, nagging doubts from time to time, if not all the time, or they have these questions that they think about, and they kind of push to the back of their mind. It's important probably to vocalize that. There's definitely been a long period of time where I've had to think through lots and lots of different things. By no means has been a big crash or a big anything like that at all. Probably didn't even recognize it at the time, didn't even notice it was happening, because it's such a slow burning sort of thing. But it's real that people do have those as they go through life. Their experiences sort of affect them, and you think about things in different ways that you perhaps have thought of before, rightly or wrongly. It just that's what happens, and so people do think through their worldview, and yeah, it's important that we're able to talk through and help and support people who go through that, and raise your hand and say that this is happening and could do with some help. And what we're doing with Bible Feed is not it's 100% about sort of preaching. It's a witness thing. There's lots of people out there in a community, in a Christian community, like we've already talked about, who are going through a worldview crash, and they're realizing that maybe the Trinity isn't supported in Scripture, and it only came about in the Council of Nicaea or whatever, and they're feeling those same really gut-wrenching experiences. And so if what we can provide for them is something that will help them so that they don't crash right from an orthodox Christianity right through to an atheism, and actually they fall and they stop in our safety net, and then come to what we believe to be the gospel, then that's absolutely what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to share about Bible Feed?
We haven't said anything about the Open Bible Learning courses, but I don't think that's on Bible Feed yet. It's openbiblelearning.com is a different site that I've been running for many years, but recently relaunched the Learn to Read the Bible Effectively course on a learning management system. So it's a sort of a proper interactive system that you kind of work through, and it asks you questions, and it's got a mix of content and some videos and audio and so on. So that's up and live at the moment, and I think we'll be linking to that from the Bible Feed website at some point. And certainly through the course of this year, we've got plans to put some smaller courses, just kind of one on the letter to the Galatians, and we're going to do something on the soul and heaven and hell, and something on the Spirit of God, hopefully, just as sort of bite-sized courses.
That's great. So there's no human interaction with the courses.
It's an online training platform.
That's great.
That we're hoping to develop, but that's sort of in parallel.
Well, thanks so much, guys. It's been really lovely to talk to you. And for everyone listening, please check out biblefeed.org.
Thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.